There's a question that visits you late at night, when the house is silent and the world has gone to sleep. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, like fog settling over a lake. Will anyone ever truly know me if I keep living this quiet? You've built a life that protects your energy. You've learned to say no. You've stopped forcing yourself into spaces that drain you. You've chosen solitude over performance, depth over noise, home over crowds. And most days, that feels like relief. But some nights, when you're alone with your thoughts, a different feeling rises, a whisper beneath the calm, a fear you don't often name. What if I've made myself unknowable? This isn't about loneliness in the usual sense. It's not about wanting more friends or a busier social calendar. It's something deeper, more existential. It's the fear that by protecting yourself so carefully, you've also hidden yourself so completely that no one will ever see the person you actually are. Not the version you perform at work, not the polite stranger you become in small talk, but you, the one who thinks in metaphors, who feels everything too much, who lives in a world of inner landscapes most people never even notice. And here's what makes this fear so painful. You're not sure if being truly known is even possible without betraying the very thing that keeps you sane, your need for quiet, for space, for a life that doesn't constantly demand you to explain yourself. This is the paradox of the sensitive soul living in solitude. You long to be seen, but you can't bear to be exposed. Most people don't understand this tension. They see someone who lives quietly and assume that person doesn't want connection. They see someone who declines invitations and think that person doesn't care about relationships. They see someone who needs time alone and conclude that person is fine on their own. But that's not the whole story, is it? You do want to be known. You just don't want to be drained in the process. You do want connection. You just don't want to perform a version of yourself that isn't real. You do want intimacy. You just don't want it to cost you your inner peace. And so you live in this strange, in-between space, close enough to people to be polite, distant enough to stay protected, present enough to seem normal, hidden enough to stay safe. But after years of this, after decades of carefully managing how much of yourself you reveal, a question starts to form. Has anyone ever really known me? Will anyone ever? There are people who can go their entire lives being partially seen and feel completely fine. They share pieces of themselves easily. They bond over surface-level commonalities. They don't need anyone to understand the depths because they don't spend much time in the depths themselves. But you're not like that. Your inner world is vast, complex, contradictory. You think about things most people never consider. You feel things most people would find exhausting. You notice subtleties in conversations, in art, in silence that others walk right past. And because of that, the gap between who you are inside and who people perceive you to be feels unbridgeable. Jung would say that being truly known is one of the deepest human needs and one of the rarest human experiences. Most people, he believed, spend their entire lives wearing masks. Not because they're dishonest, but because the world demands it. Society rewards the persona, the acceptable, functional, easy to understand version of you. But the self, the true, complex, contradictory, deeply feeling person beneath the surface, that part rarely gets seen. For most people, this is uncomfortable but manageable. They adapt. They perform. They live mostly on the surface and don't think too much about what's underneath. But for you, it's different. You can't live entirely on the surface. Your inner world is too vivid, too real, too important. You think in layers. You feel in dimensions most people don't even know exist. And because of that, the gap between who you are and who people think you are feels enormous. It's not that you're lying. It's that the truth of you is too much, too strange, too intense for casual conversation. So you edit yourself. You simplify. You offer the version of you that won't overwhelm, won't confuse, won't require too much explanation. And over time, that edited version becomes the only version most people ever see. Jung called this the tragedy of the individuated person, someone who has done the inner work, who knows themselves deeply, but finds that very few people in the world can meet them at that level. You become fluent in a language almost no one else speaks. And the loneliness of that is different from ordinary loneliness. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who can't see you. I remember a period in my life when I realized I had become almost invisible. Not literally, of course. People saw me. They greeted me. They knew my name. But no one knew me. I had friends, but they were friends with a version of me I had carefully constructed. Pleasant, low maintenance, easy to be around. I had conversations, but they stayed safely on the surface. I had relationships, but they were built on what I didn't say more than what I did. And for a while, I told myself this was fine. I told myself I was protecting my energy, honoring my need for space, living authentically by not forcing connection. But underneath, something else was happening. I was disappearing. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, quietly, like a photograph left too long in the sun. And one night, sitting alone in my apartment, I felt it, the full weight of that disappearance. If I died tomorrow, would anyone know who I actually was? It wasn't self-pity. It wasn't loneliness in the way most people mean it. It was the realization that I had become so good at protecting myself that I had also made myself unreachable. I had built walls so high that even people who wanted to know me couldn't find a way in. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I even knew how to let them in anymore. I had spent so many years translating myself into simpler terms, performing the acceptable version, hiding the parts that felt too intense, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be fully seen. And I wondered, is it even possible anymore? Have I been alone too long? Here's what most people misunderstand about sensitive, introverted, solitude-loving people. They think you don't want to be known because you don't seek attention. They think you don't need intimacy because you don't need constant company. They think you're fine alone because you seem calm, self-sufficient, unbothered. But that's not it at all. You do want to be known. You just want to be known accurately. You don't want someone to project their assumptions onto you. You don't want someone to love an idea of you that isn't real. You don't want someone to demand you become louder, busier, more available just to prove you care. You want someone who can sit in the quiet with you and still see you clearly. You want someone who understands that your silence isn't emptiness, it's depth. You want someone who doesn't mistake your need for solitude as a lack of love. Rilke understood this. He wrote about love not as fusion, but as two solitudes protecting and touching and greeting each other. He believed that real intimacy doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It requires the opposite. Two people who are so secure in their own inner worlds that they can meet without merging, connect without consuming. For Rilke, the highest form of love was one that gave each person space to remain whole. Not love as possession, but love as mutual respect for each other's separateness. He wrote, "Once the realization is accepted that even between the closest human beings, infinite distances continue, a wonderful living side by side can grow. But that kind of connection is rare. And when you live quietly, when you don't put yourself out there, when you don't perform or chase or constantly make yourself available, finding that kind of connection feels almost impossible, because the world doesn't teach people how to love like that. It teaches them to love through constant contact, through shared schedules, through proving devotion by being always available. And you can't do that. You won't do that. So you wonder, does that mean I'll never be loved in the way I need to be loved? So the fear grows. What if I'm too quiet to ever be found? What if the kind of person who could truly know me doesn't exist? Or exists but will never cross my path because I'm always at home? What if I've spent so long protecting my inner world that I've locked everyone out, including the people I actually want to let in? These aren't irrational fears. They're based on real patterns. You've tried to explain yourself before and people didn't understand. You've let people in and they wanted you to be different. You've been vulnerable and it cost you more than it gave. So you learn to be careful. You learn to stay quiet. You learned that being known often means being misunderstood, judged, or asked to change. And now, years later, you're safe. But you're also unseen. You've protected yourself so well that you've also isolated yourself. And the question becomes, how do I let someone in without dismantling everything I've built to protect my peace? This is where most advice fails you. People tell you to put yourself out there, to join groups, to be more social, to lower your walls. But they don't understand that your walls aren't the problem. Your walls are what keep you alive. The problem is that you haven't yet learned how to build a door. But here's the part almost no one explains. Being truly known doesn't require you to become more social, more available, more extroverted. It requires you to become more discerning. The problem isn't that you live quietly. The problem is that you've been trying to be known by people who were never capable of knowing you in the first place. Most people don't have the capacity for the kind of intimacy you're looking for. Not because they're bad people, but because they live differently. They connect differently. They think and feel differently. They bond through shared activities, through humor, through light conversation. And that's fine, for them. But you bond through shared silence, through unspoken understanding, through conversations that go beneath the surface and stay there. You don't need to be known by everyone. You need to be known by one or two people who speak your language. And those people exist. They're rare, but they exist. They're the ones who don't need you to perform, who don't mistake your quietness for coldness, who understand that your need for space isn't rejection, it's how you stay whole. They're the ones who can hold complexity, who don't need you to be simple or easy, who see your depth and aren't frightened by it. They're the ones who love you because of your strangeness, not in spite of it. The Stoics, like Seneca, believed that one real friend is worth more than 1,000 acquaintances. He wrote, "The wise man is self-sufficient, not in the sense that he wishes to be without friends, but in the sense that he can be without them." You don't need to be known to survive, but you want to be known to feel fully alive. And that's not weakness, that's humanity. Seneca also said that true friendship, the kind where you are fully seen, is one of life's greatest treasures. But it cannot be rushed, it cannot be forced. It unfolds slowly between people who have the patience and the depth to truly see each other. You're not broken for wanting that, you're awake. So what does it actually look like to be known when you live this quietly? First, you stop trying to be known in ways that don't fit you. You stop forcing yourself into group settings hoping someone will notice you. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. You stop performing a more palatable version of yourself just to be liked. Instead, you start creating small, intentional opportunities for real connection. Maybe that's a long walk with one person instead of a loud dinner with 10. Maybe it's a letter, a voice note, a conversation that unfolds slowly over weeks instead of one rushed coffee. Maybe it's finding people online, in books, in quiet corners of the world who think the way you do. Being known doesn't require you to change your life. It requires you to be more intentional about who you let into it. You start recognizing the people who have the capacity to see you, and you stop wasting energy on those who don't. You learn to notice the difference between someone who wants to know you and someone who just wants you to fit into their idea of who you should be. And you give yourself permission to walk away from the second kind, even if it means being alone longer. Second, you practice being known in small doses. You don't have to reveal everything at once. You don't have to explain your entire inner world in one conversation. You can let someone see one true thing about you, then another, then another. Real intimacy isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in tiny moments of honesty, repeated over time with someone who doesn't run when they see the real you. You say one thing that's true, and you watch how they respond. Do they lean in or pull back? Do they ask deeper questions or change the subject? Do they meet your vulnerability with their own, or do they deflect? This is how you learn who is safe, not by opening yourself completely and hoping for the best, but by testing the waters slowly, carefully, intelligently. Third, you stop waiting to be found and start gently signaling that you exist. This doesn't mean performing. It doesn't mean pretending to be more social than you are. It means leaving small traces of your real self in the world. A comment that's actually honest. A piece of writing that's actually true. A moment where you don't hide. The right people will notice. Not everyone, but the right ones. You don't need to shout. You just need to stop whispering so quietly that no one can hear you. And here's what you need to understand. Living quietly doesn't make you unknowable. It makes you selectively knowable. You're not hiding. You're filtering. You're not closed off. You're careful. And that's not a flaw. That's wisdom. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. You've learned that some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you speak. You've learned that protecting your peace is more important than being understood by people who don't have the capacity to understand. But that doesn't mean you have to live unseen forever. It means you get to choose, very carefully, who gets to see you. And when you find those one or two people, the ones who don't need you to be louder, busier, easier, you'll realize something profound. You weren't too quiet to be known. You were just waiting for someone fluent in your language. Jung believed that certain souls are meant to meet, that there are people walking through the world who carry the same frequency, the same depth, the same way of seeing. And when those people find each other, they don't need to explain themselves. They recognize each other instantly, the way you recognize your native language after years in a foreign country. That recognition is rare, but it's real, and it's worth waiting for. The life you've built, the quiet one, the careful one, the one that protects your energy and honors your need for solitude, isn't a barrier to being known. It's the foundation. Because the person who can truly know you isn't someone who demands you change. It's someone who sees the value in the way you already are. Someone who understands that your silence holds entire worlds. That your need for space is a form of self-respect. That your careful boundaries are a sign of emotional intelligence, not fear. That person might not arrive on your timeline. They might not look the way you expected, but they exist. And in the meantime, you can practice being known by the one person who's always been there, yourself. You can stop editing, stop performing, stop pretending, even to yourself, that you're too much or not enough. You can sit with the full truth of who you are, the contradictions, the depth, the strangeness, the beauty, and let that be enough. Because being truly known starts with knowing yourself so clearly that you stop apologizing for it. It starts with looking at your own inner world, the one you've spent years building, protecting, refining, and recognizing it for what it is. Not a prison, not a hiding place, a sanctuary. And sanctuaries aren't meant to be abandoned. They're meant to be shared carefully with the very few people who understand what sacred space feels like. You don't need to tear down your walls to be loved. You just need to build a door and learn to open it for the right people. And if you've ever wondered whether you can be deeply known without giving up the quiet life that keeps you sane, whether intimacy is even possible when you need so much solitude, that's a different kind of paradox, one that unfolds in the next quiet conversation. Alone together. A quiet corner of the internet for people who choose solitude over half-hearted connections.